The Meissen porcelain figurine trembled in Marcus's careless grip, and I felt my stomach clench. 18th century. Possibly worth $40,000. He was using it as a prop while he demonstrated his golf swing to his college buddies. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. And then, boom, hole in one! He thrust the delicate shepherdess toward the ceiling, her porcelain skirts catching the light from our dining room chandelier. I said nothing. Just like I'd said nothing when he'd set his sweating bourbon glass directly on the Louis XVI console table last week. Or when he'd tossed his gym bag onto the Chippendale chair my grandmother had left me. After 3 years together, I'd learned that corrections only led to lectures about how I took my little hobby too seriously. "Babe, grab us some more ice, would you?" Marcus called over his shoulder, finally, mercifully, setting down the figurine. His friends, sprawled across my carefully curated furniture like overgrown fraternity brothers, barely glanced in my direction. I was already moving toward the kitchen, playing the part I'd perfected over the past year since he'd proposed. The accommodating fiancé, the woman who kept the house running while Marcus climbed the corporate ladder at his father's commercial real estate firm. The woman who supposedly spent her days playing dress-up with old junk, as he'd so charmingly put it last month. If only he knew that this morning, I'd authenticated a previously unknown Fabergé cigarette case for a private collector in Geneva. That yesterday, Sotheby's had me on a conference call about a Qing dynasty vase coming up in their Hong Kong auction. That my little hobby had grossed $1.2 million last year, while his salary, generously inflated by nepotism, barely cracked $200,000. The ice bucket was already full. I'd prepared it an hour ago, knowing Marcus's friends would descend like locusts after their monthly golf outing. I stood in my kitchen, hands pressed against the cool marble counter, breathing slowly. Through the doorway, I could hear them laughing. "How's wedding planning going?" That was Derek, Marcus's best friend and future best man. "Heard you're doing something at that old estate out in Millbrook?" "Yeah. Olivia's got her heart set on it," Marcus said. I could hear the eye roll in his voice. "Some historical place she's obsessed with. You know how she is with old stuff." More laughter. I picked up the ice bucket, my reflection staring back at me from the copper kettle on the stove. Olivia Thornton, 34 years old. Master's degree in art history from Columbia. Certified appraiser from the American Society of Appraisers. Expert witness in 3 major art fraud cases. Currently cosplaying as a vapid housewife for reasons I was beginning to question. "At least she's hot," chimed in Josh, Marcus's work colleague. "And she doesn't nag you about working late like Stephanie does to me." "Nah, Liv's pretty chill," Marcus agreed. "She's got her little appraisal thing to keep her busy. Honestly, it's perfect. She plays with her antiques during the day, I work, and we meet up for dinner. No complaints." Her little appraisal thing. I'd heard variations of this dismissal so many times it had almost lost its sting. Almost. The truth was, I'd worked hard to keep my professional life separate from Marcus. When we first met at a charity auction 3 years ago, I'd been there as the evening's expert consultant, authenticating items for live bidding. He'd been there as his father's representative, trying to network. He'd approached me at the bar, mistaking me for another guest, and I'd been charmed by his confidence, his easy smile, the way he seemed so comfortable in his own skin. Our first 3 months had been a whirlwind. Dinner dates, weekend getaways, long conversations about art and culture. Or so I'd thought. It wasn't until we'd been together for 6 months that I realized Marcus had no real interest in the things I was passionate about. He liked the idea of dating someone cultured, someone who could navigate charity galas and museum openings, but the actual work, the scholarship, The research, the careful examination that went into authentication? That's your thing, babe, he'd say, waving his hand dismissively. I'm just here to admire the results. I should have seen it then. The warning signs were bright as highway flares. But I'd been 31. My mother had just passed away after a long illness, and Marcus had been there during the worst of it. He'd held me while I cried. He'd handled the funeral arrangements when I couldn't bear to. He'd made me laugh when I thought I'd forgotten how. And somewhere in that vulnerable period, I'd confused comfort with love, convenience with commitment. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When he proposed a year after my mother's death, in front of all his friends at a crowded restaurant, I'd said yes. Not because I wanted to, but because I was too shocked and too polite to refuse. The ring was already on my finger, his friends were applauding, and I was swept along in the momentum of other people's expectations. Now, standing in my kitchen with a bucket of ice, listening to my fiancé reduce my life's work to a little hobby, I wondered when exactly I'd lost my spine. I walked back into the dining room, set the ice bucket on the table, and smiled blandly at the 4 men sprawled across my furniture. Thanks, babe, Marcus said without looking at me. He was mid-story about some business deal his father was closing. I retreated to the far end of the room, settling into the window seat that overlooked our back garden. Being generous, I'd bought this townhouse 5 years ago, before I'd met Marcus. He'd moved in after the engagement, contributing nothing to the mortgage but treating the space like his personal fraternity house. My phone buzzed silently in my pocket. I pulled it out, careful to angle the screen away from the room. From Catherine, read Sotheby's.com. Subject: Urgent Baroque Collection. Olivia, we need you in London next week. The Ashford Estate Baroque Collection is more extensive than we thought. At least 150 pieces, possibly more. The family wants everything authenticated and appraised before the December auction. This is a career-defining project. 7 figures minimum for your consultancy fee, plus bonuses based on final sale prices. I've attached the preliminary catalog. Call me tonight if possible. We need your answer by Monday. Best, Catherine. My heart hammered against my ribs. The Ashford Estate. I'd heard whispers about this collection for years. A reclusive British earl who'd spent 5 decades amassing one of the finest private collections of Baroque art and furnishings outside of a museum. No one had seen inside Ashford Manor since the 1980s. This was the kind of opportunity that came once in a career, if you were lucky. Earth to Olivia. I looked up. Marcus was staring at me, irritation creasing his forehead. Sorry, what? Derek asked what color the bridesmaids' dresses are going to be. You've been staring at your phone for like 5 minutes. Oh, sage green, I said automatically, though I hadn't actually made that decision yet. Wedding planning had become another item on the long list of things I couldn't bring myself to care about. See? This is what I'm talking about, Marcus said to his friends, gesturing at me with his drink. Always in her own little world. I swear, half the time I'm talking to her, she's mentally cataloging the furniture or something. Accurate, actually. Just this morning, I'd noticed the veneer lifting on the sideboard and had made a mental note to call my restoration specialist. Maybe she's got a buyer for your couch, Josh joked, and they all laughed. God, I hope so, Marcus said. Then we can finally get something normal looking. No offense, babe, but some of this stuff looks like it belongs in a museum. Some of it probably does, I murmured, but no one heard me. My phone buzzed again. From chen.winechristieschk.com. Subject: Jade Collection. Confidential. Ms. Thornton, our client has agreed to your authentication terms. We're sending the pieces to your secure facility next week via diplomatic courier. As discussed, this is an extremely sensitive project. The Jade Collection is believed to include several pieces that were lost during the Cultural Revolution. Your discretion is essential. Wire transfer for the retainer, 500K USD, will arrive in your business account by end of day Monday. Regards, Dr. Chen Wei. I closed my eyes briefly. In the span of 5 minutes, I'd received offers for projects that would net me close to $1 million. Meanwhile, 15 feet away, my fiancé was explaining to his friends how my career was essentially an elaborate game of dress-up. "You okay, Liv?" Derek asked, actually looking at me with something resembling concern. "You look pale." "Just a headache," I said, standing up. "I think I'll go lie down for a bit. You guys enjoy the game." "Feel better, babe?" Marcus called, already turning back to his friends. I climbed the stairs to the second floor, my hand trailing along the banister. 18th century mahogany, original to the house, which had been built in 1887 as a merchant's residence. Every piece in this house had a story, a provenance, a history. Marcus saw old stuff. I saw generations of craftsmanship, artistic expression, cultural heritage. In my study, Marcus called it my craft room, which made me want to throw something. I locked the door behind me and finally allowed myself to breathe. The room was my sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined with reference texts on everything from Renaissance painting techniques to Ming Dynasty ceramics. My workbench held a high-powered magnifying lamp, a digital microscope, and carefully organized tools for examination. One wall was devoted to a massive corkboard covered in notes, photographs, and provenance charts for current projects. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop, pulling up the files Catherine had sent. The preliminary catalog for the Ashford collection was breathtaking. Dutch masters, Italian bronzes, French furniture that had once graced Versailles, and buried in the middle of page 47, a single-line item that made my breath catch. Lot 247, portrait, oil on canvas, unsigned, believed to be attributed to Artemisia Gentileschi, circa 1630. Portrait of an unknown woman. Provenance, private collection, Ashford family, acquired 1923 from the estate of Lord Pemberton. Artemisia Gentileschi. One of the most important and still undervalued artists of the Baroque period. A female painter who had defied every convention of her time, who had survived assault and public humiliation to create works of stunning power and beauty. If this was a genuine Gentileschi, and if I could prove it, we weren't talking about a 7-figure consultancy fee. We were talking about a painting that could sell for $20–30 million, maybe more. My hands were shaking as I dialed Catherine's number. She picked up on the first ring. "Please tell me you're saying yes. I need to see that Gentileschi in person," I said without preamble. "The portrait. Lot 247. "I had a feeling you'd catch that one." Catherine's voice was warm with approval. "The family thinks it's just a period piece, maybe a copy, but there's something about the brushwork in the preliminary photos." "The way the light hits the fabric," I interrupted, pulling up the low-resolution image on my screen. "And the hands. Look at the hands." "You see it too." Catherine's voice held a note of excitement. "Olivia, if you can authenticate this." "When do I leave?" "I'll have my assistant send you the travel details tonight. Plan on being in London for at least 2 weeks, possibly longer. The family's giving us exclusive access to the entire manor. You'll have a team, obviously, but you'll be lead on the authentication. 2 weeks in London. 2 weeks immersed in one of the finest collections I'd ever have the privilege to examine. 2 weeks to potentially discover a lost masterpiece. And 2 weeks away from Marcus. That last thought should have made me sad. Instead, I felt a weight lift from my chest. "There's one complication," I said, glancing at my engagement ring. a princess-cut diamond Marcus had chosen without any input from me. I'm supposed to be finalizing wedding arrangements. The ceremony's in 3 months. Catherine was silent for a moment. Olivia, I'm going to say something, and you can tell me to mind my own business if you want. Go ahead. I've worked with you for 7 years. I've seen you authenticate pieces that made grown men cry. I've watched you testify in court and destroy so-called experts with your knowledge. You're one of the finest appraisers I've ever encountered, and I don't say that lightly. Thank you, but in all that time, Catherine continued, I've never heard you talk about this fiancé of yours with even a fraction of the passion you have for a good 18th century escritoire. And now you're telling me that examining the collection of a lifetime is a complication because of wedding planning? I opened my mouth to defend Marcus, to explain that he was supportive in his own way, that he just didn't understand my work, that it was fine, really. But the words wouldn't come. Just think about it, Catherine said gently. I'll send the details tonight. We'd love to have you on this project, Olivia. But more than that, I'd love to see you excited about something again, the way you used to be. After we hung up, I sat in my study for a long time, listening to the muffled sounds of the football game downstairs, the periodic roars of laughter from Marcus and his friends. My email dinged. The wire transfer from Christie's had arrived. $500,000, deposited into the business account that Marcus didn't know existed. An account that currently held just over $3 million from various projects over the years. I'd been careful to keep my professional life completely separate from Marcus. Separate bank accounts, separate business entity, separate phone line. Initially, it had been about maintaining professional boundaries. Many of my clients demanded absolute discretion, and I took that seriously. But somewhere along the way, the separation had become a shield. A way to protect the part of myself that still felt valuable, accomplished, real. Because when I was Olivia Thornton, certified appraiser and expert consultant, I knew exactly who I was. I commanded respect. My opinions mattered. People, important people, wealthy people, institutions, trusted my judgment with objects worth millions of dollars. But when I was just Olivia, Marcus's fiancé, I was someone who needed to be more chill, less obsessive, more normal. Someone whose work was a little hobby. Someone who should focus on bridesmaid dresses and seating charts instead of chemical analysis of paint pigments. I pulled up the photos of the Gentileschi portrait again, zooming in on the details. The subject was a woman in her 30s, dressed in rich fabrics, her gaze direct and unflinching. There was something in her expression, a kind of quiet strength, a refusal to be diminished, that spoke to me. I see you, I whispered to the portrait. I see exactly who you are. A crash from downstairs made me jump. More laughter, followed by Marcus's voice. It's fine, it's fine. It's just some old vase. Liv's got 1,000,000 of them. My jaw clenched. I forced myself to take 3 deep breaths before standing and walking back downstairs. The scene that greeted me in the dining room made my blood pressure spike. Josh was standing near the sideboard, holding the pieces of what had been a 19th century Sèvres vase, not quite museum quality, but still worth several $1,000s. Marcus was laughing, helping pick up the larger pieces. Sorry, babe, Marcus said when he saw me. Josh got a little enthusiastic celebrating the touchdown. We'll replace it. That vase was made in 1845, I said quietly. It was part of a set commissioned for the Duchess of Marlborough. You can't just replace it. Marcus's expression shifted from apologetic to annoyed. Come on, Liv. It's not like it was some priceless heirloom. You probably got it at an estate sale for like $50. $200,000, I said, watching his face change. I acquired it last year for a client who decided not to purchase it. It was in my personal collection. The room went very quiet. 200,000? Derek repeated. Dollars? For a vase? It's Sèvres porcelain, I said, my voice still calm despite the fury building in my chest. Soft paste, with hand-painted reserves depicting scenes from Versailles. There were only 12 pieces in the original set. This was number 7. Now it's worthless. Josh had gone pale. Oh my God, Olivia, I'm so sorry. I'll pay for it. You can't pay for it, I interrupted. Because it doesn't exist anymore. You can write me a check for $200,000 if you want to try to make it right, but that won't restore the piece. $200,000? Marcus's voice had gone up an octave. For a vase? That's insane. Who pays that for a vase? Museums, I said. Private collectors. People who understand the historical and artistic value of... It's a vase, Marcus interrupted. It's a thing. It held flowers. You're seriously going to stand there and lecture us about breaking a flower vase? I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. At the man I'd agreed to marry. The man who was currently more concerned with defending his friend's carelessness than with the destruction of something I valued. Get out, I said quietly. What? All of you. Get out of my house. Babe, come on, Marcus started, reaching for my arm. You're overreacting, it's just... If you say just a vase one more time, I said, my voice ice cold, I will throw you out myself. For the first time since I'd known him, Marcus looked uncertain. Liv, seriously, let's just calm down and... This is my house, I said. That was my vase. And I want all of you to leave. Now. Derek, at least, had the sense to look ashamed. Come on, guys. Let's give Olivia some space. They filed out slowly, Josh still apologizing, Marcus shooting me looks that ranged from confusion to anger. I stood in the doorway, watching them pile into Derek's car, and waited until they'd pulled away before closing and locking the door. Then I walked back to the dining room and knelt beside the broken pieces of the Sèvres vase, carefully collecting each fragment. I didn't cry. I'd stopped crying over broken things years ago, when I watched my father's small antique shop get demolished to make way for a parking lot, taking with it his entire inventory because he couldn't afford storage. That had taught me that beautiful things were fragile, that history was easily destroyed by people who didn't understand its value. What I hadn't learned, what I'd somehow forgotten, was that I was allowed to care, that my expertise, my passion, my work mattered, that I didn't have to make myself smaller to accommodate someone else's inability to see my worth. My phone buzzed. Marcus, we need to talk. You can't just kick me out of our place over an accident. I stared at the text for a long moment, then typed back. It's not our place. It's mine. I bought it 5 years before I met you. And it wasn't an accident. It was carelessness. There's a difference. His response came immediately. This is ridiculous. I'm coming back. We're talking this out like adults. No, I typed. We're not. I'll pack your things. You can pick them up tomorrow. Olivia, don't do this. Don't blow up our relationship over a vase. I looked at the fragments in my hands. Delicate porcelain, hand-painted flowers, a piece of history that had survived nearly 180 years only to be destroyed in my dining room by a drunk man celebrating a football touchdown. It's not about the vase, I typed. It's about the fact that you'll never understand why the vase mattered. And I'm tired of pretending that's okay. I blocked his number before he could respond, then called my locksmith. Hi, George. It's Olivia Thornton. I need all my locks changed tomorrow morning. First thing. Yes, I know it's a Sunday. I'll pay double. After that, I called my lawyer. Patricia, it's Olivia. Sorry to bother you on a Saturday night. I need you to draft a letter for me. My fiancé has been living in my house for the past year. I want him legally notified that he needs to remove all his belongings by next Friday, and that he no longer has any right to access the property. Patricia Chen had handled my business contracts for years. She knew me well enough not to ask questions. Consider it done. I'll have it messengered to him Monday morning. Are you okay? I'm better than I've been in a long time, I said, surprised to find it was true. After hanging up, I carefully wrapped each piece of the broken vase in acid-free tissue paper. Some things couldn't be repaired, but they could at least be properly preserved. Maybe someday I'd attempt a restoration, though the piece would never be the same. Sort of like me, I thought. My phone rang. Catherine. Sorry, I know it's late, she said. But I wanted to make sure you got the travel details. Your flight to London leaves Tuesday morning. We've booked you at the Stafford. I know it's your favorite. And Olivia? Yes? Thank you for saying yes. The art world needs more people who care as much as you do. I looked around my dining room, my carefully curated space filled with pieces I'd spent years collecting, studying, preserving. Every object here had a story. Every piece represented hours of research, authentication, careful negotiation. Catherine, I should thank you for reminding me why I do this. Always happy to enable your obsession, she said warmly. Get some rest. You've got a big week ahead. After we hung up, I made myself a cup of tea, using a simple modern mug, not the 18th century tea service I usually favored, and returned to my study. I pulled up the Ashford collection files again, but this time I also opened a new document. At the top, I typed, "Things to do before London." Change locks, pack Marcus's belongings, cancel wedding venue, get deposit back if possible. Return engagement ring, keep documentation, call mother's attorney about updating will schedule meeting with Patricia I.R. Property rights. Buy new phone, keep professional line, ditch personal. I stared at the list, waiting for panic to set in. For regret. For the sinking feeling that I was making a huge mistake. Instead, I felt light, unburdened, free. My phone buzzed, not Marcus this time, but an email notification. Dr. Chen Wei from Christie's, sending additional details about the jade collection. Ms. Thornton, one additional note about the jade pieces. Our client believes one of the items may be a piece from the Qianlong Emperor's personal collection, a jade seal that disappeared in the 1860s. If you can authenticate its provenance, we're looking at a potential auction record for Chinese antiquities. No pressure, of course. Just thought you should know what's potentially at stake. With respect, Dr. Chen, I laughed out loud in my empty study. No pressure. Just the possibility of discovering one of the most important lost artifacts in Chinese imperial history. This was my life. This was what I did. I found things that were lost, proved things that others doubted, preserved beauty that might otherwise be destroyed, and I was very, very good at it. I looked at my engagement ring, still sitting on my finger. The princess-cut diamond caught the light from my desk lamp, throwing little sparkles across my papers. Pretty, I supposed. Generic. Expensive without being meaningful. I pulled it off and dropped it in my desk drawer. Tomorrow I'd return it and put the money, Marcus's money, really, from his trust fund, into an escrow account until we could sort out the financial details of our separation. For now, though, I had work to do. I pulled up the Gentileschi portrait again, studying every visible detail. The woman in the painting stared back at me, that direct, unflinching gaze seeming to see right through the centuries. You survived, I told her. Whatever you went through, whoever tried to diminish you, you survived. And somebody painted you. Somebody thought you were worth remembering. My doorbell rang, making me jump. I checked the security camera feed on my phone. Marcus was standing on my front step, hands shoved in his pockets, looking simultaneously defiant and uncertain. I could go down there, let him in, have the fight he so clearly wanted to have. Explain myself. Justify my actions. make him understand. Or I could do what the woman in the portrait would do. I turned off the light in my study and went upstairs to my bedroom, leaving Marcus standing on the doorstep of a house he'd never really understood was mine. He rang the bell 3 more times, then finally left. I lay in bed, watching shadows move across my ceiling, and thought about Baroque paintings and jade seals and pieces of history that had survived centuries of war, disaster, and human carelessness. If they could endure, so could I. In fact, I was just getting started. The locksmith arrived at 7 Sunday morning, just as the first light touched my garden. I'd been awake for hours, systematically packing Marcus's belongings into boxes and suitcases I'd ordered for overnight delivery. "Rough night?" George asked, taking in my appearance, still in yesterday's clothes, hair in a messy bun. "Rough 3 years," I said. "But I'm fixing that." By 9 o'clock, I had new locks, new keys, and a house that was completely mine again. By 10, I'd drafted an email to our wedding venue canceling everything. By 11, Marcus's belongings were stacked neatly in the foyer, and I'd sent him a single text from my new number: "Your things are ready for pickup. Patricia Chen of Chen and Associates will be present from 2 to 4 p.m. today to ensure the transfer of property goes smoothly." After that, all communication goes through her office. His response came within seconds, from a number I didn't recognize. He must have figured out I'd blocked him. "This is insane. We're supposed to get married in 3 months. You're throwing away everything over one stupid mistake?" I stared at the message, then typed back, "You called my career playing dress-up. You broke a $200,000 piece and called it just a vase. You've spent 3 years making me feel like my work doesn't matter. That's not one mistake. That's who you are. Goodbye, Marcus." This time, I didn't block the number. I just turned off my phone. Patricia arrived at 1:45, looking impeccable as always in a charcoal suit, her silver hair styled perfectly despite the Sunday emergency call. "Show me the damage," she said, all business. I led her to the dining room where I'd documented everything: photos of the broken vase, the wet rings on the furniture, the scratches on the hardwood floor from careless moving of chairs. "This is a solid case for property damage," Patricia said, making notes on her tablet. "We can pursue compensation if you want." "I don't want his money," I said. "I just want him gone." She studied me with sharp, assessing eyes. "You're sure about this? Once we start the formal separation process, walking it back gets complicated." "I've never been more sure of anything." Patricia smiled, a rare expression for her. "Good. You deserve better than that boy." Marcus arrived at 2:03, flanked by Derek and his father, Robert Hartwell, a silver-haired man who'd made millions in commercial real estate and clearly believed his money could solve any problem. "Olivia?" Robert began, his voice oozing false warmth. "I think we've all had time to cool down. Why don't we sit down and discuss this like reasonable adults?" "Mr. Hartwell?" Patricia cut in smoothly. "My client has made her position clear. Your son is here to collect his belongings. Nothing more." Robert's expression hardened. "Now listen here. My son has been living in this house for over a year. Common law marriage statutes don't apply in New York," Patricia interrupted, her voice sharp as a scalpel. "And even if they did, Ms. Thornton has documentation proving sole ownership of this property, purchased 5 years before she met your son. Mr. Hartwell, the younger, has no legal claim to this residence or its contents." "What about the engagement ring?" Robert demanded. "That's a family heirloom, worth $60,000. I pulled the ring box from my pocket and handed it to Patricia, who'd already prepared the receipt. "Documented return of property. Witnessed and signed. We're done here." Marcus had been silent throughout this exchange, his face cycling through emotions I couldn't quite read. Finally, he spoke. "Liv, please, can we just talk?" Alone? No, I said simply. I love you, he said, and for the first time he sounded genuine. I know I screwed up. I know I didn't appreciate what you do. But we can fix this. I can change. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing but a distant sort of pity. Marcus, you don't even know what I do. You've never asked to see my office. You've never attended a single auction where I was consulting. You've never read any of my published papers or asked about my clients. You love the idea of me, the pretty, accommodating woman who keeps your house nice and doesn't complain when you work late. But you don't love me. You don't even know me. That's not fair, he protested. You never told me about whatever big important work you supposedly do. I tried, I said quietly. For the first 6 months, I tried constantly. I invited you to gallery openings. I showed you pieces I was excited about. I tried to explain why authentication matters, why provenance is important. And every single time, you changed the subject or checked your phone or made some joke about me being obsessed with old junk. He opened his mouth, then closed it. So I stopped trying, I continued. I made myself smaller so you could feel bigger. And that's on me. I should have ended this 2 years ago. Robert cleared his throat. The wedding venue deposit was $20,000. I assume you'll be returning that? The deposit was paid from my personal account, I said calmly. I have the receipts, so no. Now that's just petty. Mr. Hartwell, Patricia said, steel in her voice. Your son is welcome to take his belongings and leave. If you continue to harass my client, we'll pursue a restraining order. Are we clear? Derek, who'd been standing awkwardly by the door, finally spoke up. Come on, Marcus. Let's just get your stuff and go. It took them 45 minutes to load everything into Derek's truck. I watched from my study window, Patricia standing guard in the foyer in case they tried to take anything that wasn't theirs. When the truck finally pulled away, Patricia came upstairs to find me. How are you holding up? Honestly, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in years. She handed me a folder. Separation agreement. Everything's outlined. No shared property, no financial entanglement. Clean break. I'll file it tomorrow. He has 30 days to contest, but given that he has zero legal standing, I doubt he'll try. Thank you, Patricia. For everything. Thank you for finally coming to your senses, she said dryly. Now, I believe you have a flight to London on Tuesday? Word traveled fast. Catherine told you? She may have mentioned it when I called to confirm you'd be available for the Ashford project. Olivia, this collection, it's extraordinary. You're going to do brilliant work. After she left, I stood in my empty house and felt the silence wrap around me like a blessing. Then I got to work. The flight to London was blissfully uneventful. I spent 8 hours reviewing the Ashford collection files, making notes, preparing my authentication protocols. No one interrupted me. No one needed anything from me. No one made jokes about my little hobby. Catherine met me at Heathrow personally, looking elegant in a camel-colored coat. You look different, she said immediately. Good different. I ended my engagement. Her eyebrows shot up. When? 2 days ago. It was time. She studied me for a long moment, then smiled. Well, I'd say I'm sorry, but I'm terrible at lying. Come on, let's get you to the hotel. We have a lot to discuss. Over dinner at the Stafford's restaurant, Catherine briefed me on the Ashford project logistics. The Earl's grandson, Thomas Ashford, had inherited the estate and its contents after his grandfather's death 6 months ago. The family needed to liquidate. Death taxes were substantial, and maintaining the manor was financially impossible. Thomas is young, early 30s, and completely overwhelmed, Catherine explained. His grandfather was a recluse who kept immaculate records, but never had anything professionally appraised. We're estimating the collection at anywhere from $50 to $200 million, depending on authenticity and condition. And the Gentileschi? Ah! Catherine's eyes gleamed. That's where things get interesting. The family story is that Lord Pemberton acquired it in 1923 from an Italian dealer who claimed it was a copy. But the dealer's records, which Thomas found in the estate archives, suggest otherwise. There are letters. Letters. I leaned forward. Letters between the dealer and a scholar who believed the painting was genuine, but couldn't prove it with the technology available at the time. The scholar died in 1927. His research was lost. But if we can build on his foundation, use modern analysis techniques, we could authenticate a lost Gentileschi, I finished. We could revolutionize Baroque art scholarship, Catherine corrected. This isn't just about the money, Olivia. This is about recovering a piece of history that the art world thought was lost forever. That night, in my hotel room, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the woman in the portrait, her direct gaze, her refusal to look away or diminish herself. I pulled out my laptop and started researching everything I could find about Artemisia Gentileschi's known works, her techniques, her biography. The more I read, the more convinced I became that the Ashford portrait could be genuine. Artemisia had painted many portraits of women, strong women, women who survived, women who refused to be victims despite everything society threw at them. She'd been raped by her father's colleague, forced to testify in court while being tortured to prove she was telling the truth, and then spent the rest of her life creating art that challenged every assumption about what women could do and be. If I could prove this painting was hers, I wouldn't just be authenticating art. I'd be recovering the voice of a woman who refused to be silenced. Ashford Manor was everything I'd dreamed it would be. A sprawling Jacobean estate set on 200 acres of countryside, the house itself was a masterpiece of 17th century architecture. Thomas Ashford met us at the entrance, looking anxious and exhausted. "Ms. Thornton," he said, shaking my hand, "thank you for coming. I have to admit, I'm completely out of my depth here. My grandfather collected for 50 years, and I don't even know where to start. That's why I'm here," I said warmly, "to help you understand what you have." He led us through room after room of treasures, Dutch paintings covering entire walls, French furniture that belonged in Versailles, Italian sculptures that museums would fight over. I'd brought my full team, 2 assistant appraisers, a photographer, a conservator, and we spent the first 2 days simply cataloging and documenting. On the 3rd day, Thomas took me to see the Gentileschi. It hung in the library, half hidden between 2 bookcases, unframed and unmaintained. My heart sank when I saw the condition. There was surface dirt, some craquelure, potential water damage in one corner. But underneath all that, I could see her, the woman in the portrait. And I could see the hand of someone who knew how to paint flesh, fabric, light. "May I?" I asked, pulling on my examination gloves. Thomas nodded, watching as I carefully lifted the painting from its hooks and carried it to the conservation table we'd set up in the great hall. Under magnification, the painting revealed its secrets. The brushwork was confident, precise. The understanding of anatomy was sophisticated. The way the light fell across the woman's face showed a mastery of chiaroscuro that few artists of the period possessed. "Catherine," I said quietly, "call the lab. I need paint analysis, canvas dating, everything we can get." For the next week, I barely slept. Every morning, I was at Ashford Manor by dawn, examining the portrait under different lights, different magnifications. I studied every inch of canvas, every brush stroke, every crack in the paint. The technical analysis came back exactly as I'd hoped. The canvas was from the correct period, early 17th century. The paint composition matched other authenticated Gentileschi works. The style, the technique, the subject matter. Everything pointed to Artemisia. But the final piece of the puzzle came from the letters. Thomas had found them in his grandfather's study. Correspondence between Lord Pemberton and the Italian dealer who'd sold him the painting. And buried in those letters was a reference to a previous owner, the Medici family. That sent me down a research rabbit hole that consumed another 3 days. I tracked down Medici family records, inventories from their various palaces, correspondence between family members. And there, in a letter dated 1632, I found it. Artemisia has completed a portrait of Lucrezia. Most remarkably rendered. I shall keep it always. Lucrezia de' Medici. The woman in the portrait had a name. I stood in the Ashford Library holding a photocopy of a 400-year-old letter and felt tears streaming down my face. Olivia? Thomas had come looking for me. Are you all right? It's real, I said, my voice shaking. It's really her. Artemisia painted this woman, Lucrezia de' Medici, in 1632. This isn't a copy or an attribution. This is a genuine Artemisia Gentileschi portrait, with documented provenance going back to the Medici family. Thomas went very pale. What does that mean, in terms of value? It means, I said carefully, that you're looking at one of the most important art discoveries of the decade, $30 million. Maybe more. He sat down heavily on the nearest chair. 30 million. For a painting my grandfather thought was a copy. For a painting by one of the most important artists of the Baroque period, I corrected gently. A woman who survived assault and public humiliation to create work that still speaks to us 400 years later. This isn't just valuable, Thomas. It's historically significant. That evening, I called Catherine with the news. You did it, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Olivia, you actually did it. Do you know what this means for your career? I know what it means for Artemisia, I said. Another one of her works recovered, another piece of her voice restored to the world. That too, Catherine agreed. But seriously, this authentication is going to make you the most sought-after appraiser in the world. Every major collection will want you on their team. After we hung up, I walked through the manor one last time, trailing my fingers along furniture that had witnessed centuries of history. In the library, I stopped in front of Lucrezia's portrait. Properly cleaned now, ready to be reframed and presented to the world. Thank you, I whispered to her, for surviving, for letting yourself be painted, for refusing to look away. She stared back at me with that direct, unflinching gaze, and I realized she wasn't thanking me. I was thanking her. I stayed in London for another week, finishing the authentication of the remaining Ashford collection. The final inventory exceeded even Catherine's optimistic estimates, over $180 million in art and furnishings, but nothing compared to Lucrezia. The day before I was scheduled to fly home, my phone rang. An unknown number. Ms. Thornton, this is Marcus. I almost hung up. Almost. How did you get this number? I have my ways. Look, I needed to tell you something. My dad pulled some strings. Found out about your trip to London. Found out about your business. About how much you actually make. About who you actually are. I said nothing. Why didn't you tell me? His voice cracked. Why did you let me think you were just what? I interrupted. Just a woman with a little hobby? Just someone who played dress up with old junk? Silence. I told you, Marcus. I tried to tell you for months. You just never listened. I know, he said quietly. I know I screwed up. I know I didn't see you. But Liv, $34 million painting? You authenticated a $34 million painting? The auction estimates had been released that morning. The Gentileschi had made international news. Yes, I said simply. That's that's incredible. You're incredible. I was such an idiot. If I could just, if you'd give me another chance, no. But I understand now. I see what you do. I see how important you are. You see the money, I corrected. You see the prestige. You see something that makes you look good by association. You still don't see me. That's not fair. I'm trying here. Marcus, do you know why Artemisia Gentileschi matters? What? The painter. The woman who created the work I authenticated. Do you know why she's important? Silence. She lived in a world that tried to break her, I said. Men who thought they could take what they wanted from her. A society that blamed her for her own assault. A father who cared more about his reputation than her pain. But she survived. She painted. She created art that forces us to see women as fully human. Strong, angry, capable, real. That's why her work matters. Not because it's worth millions of dollars, but because it refuses to let us look away from the truth. Okay, but what does that have to? You never wanted to see the truth of me, I interrupted. You wanted someone pretty and convenient who didn't challenge you or make you feel inadequate. And I let you treat me that way because I was afraid of being alone. But I'm not afraid anymore. So that's it? You're just going to throw away 3 years. I'm not throwing anything away, I said. I'm choosing myself. Finally. Goodbye, Marcus. I hung up and blocked the number. Then I called Patricia. Make sure the separation agreement includes a non-disclosure clause, I said. He doesn't get to talk about my business or my work. Ever. Consider it done, she said. How's London? Perfect, I said. Absolutely perfect. 3 months later, I stood in Sotheby's London auction house, watching as Lucrezia's portrait was unveiled to a room full of collectors, curators, and journalists. The bidding was fierce. Museums fought with private collectors. Phone bidders from Asia competed with European dealers. When the hammer finally came down, the final price was $42 million, a record for a female Baroque artist. The painting went to a museum in Florence. Appropriate, since Lucrezia had been born there. It would hang in a gallery dedicated to female artists, where millions of people would see it every year. Where Lucrezia's direct, unflinching gaze would challenge everyone who looked at her to see what Artemisia had seen. A woman who refused to be diminished. After the auction, Catherine found me in the crowd. Congratulations, she said, handing me a glass of champagne. Your consultancy fee just cleared, 7 figures, as promised. Plus the bonus, I said, smiling. Plus a substantial bonus. So, Olivia Thornton, what's next? I thought about my townhouse in New York, beautiful and peaceful and entirely mine. About the Christie's Jade project waiting for me. About the dozen other clients who'd reached out after news of the Gentileschi authentication broke. About a life I'd almost traded away for someone who could never see my worth. Everything, I said. Everything is next. Thomas Ashford appeared at my elbow looking dazed. I still can't believe that just happened. $42 million. For a painting that was hanging in my library. For a painting by Artemisia Gentileschi, I corrected gently. For a piece of history that deserved to be recognized. Because of you, he said. Because you saw what no one else did. I looked across the gallery at Lucrezia's portrait, already being carefully wrapped for transport to Florence. No, I said, because Artemisia made sure we couldn't look away. I just helped people remember how to see. Later that night, back in my hotel room, I opened my laptop and found an email waiting from an unexpected source. From Derek Morrison, HartwellRealty.com. Subject: Apology. Olivia, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to say this. I was there the night Josh broke your vase. I was there when Marcus made jokes about your little hobby. I never said anything. I never stood up for you. And I should have. I saw the news about the painting you authenticated. $42 million. It's incredible. You're incredible. And Marcus was an idiot. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that some of us are capable of learning, of seeing when we were wrong. I hope you're doing well. You deserve all the success coming your way. Derek. I stared at the email for a long moment, then typed a reply. Derek. Thank you for the apology. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. I hope you've learned something from all this. Not about me, specifically, but about paying attention to the people in your life. About seeing them as they actually are, not as you assume they are. The vase you broke? It was a Sèvres piece from 1845, worth $200,000. But that's not why it mattered. It mattered because it was beautiful, because someone had made it with care and skill, because it had survived nearly 180 years of history, and it was destroyed in seconds by carelessness. People are like that too. We survive, we endure, we carry our histories with us, and we deserve to be treated with care. Take care of yourself. Olivia, I hit send and closed my laptop. Tomorrow, I'd fly home to New York, to my townhouse, my workspace, my carefully curated life, to the Jade collection waiting for authentication, to a calendar full of consultations and projects and opportunities, to a life where I never had to make myself smaller to make someone else comfortable. I walked to the window and looked out at London, ancient and modern, graceful and chaotic, full of history that deserved to be seen. Somewhere in this city, Lucretia's portrait was being prepared for its journey home. A woman painted by a woman, both refusing to look away from the truth of who they were. Thank you, I whispered again, to Artemisia and to Lucrezia, to all the women who'd survived and endured and refused to be diminished. Thank you for showing me how. And then I turned away from the window and started planning my next project, because I had work to do, important work, work that mattered. And finally, after all these years, I knew exactly what I was worth. The End Epilogue. 1 year later, I received an invitation to speak at the Metropolitan Museum of Art Symposium on Baroque women artists. The event was sold out, standing room only, and as I stood at the podium looking out at hundreds of faces, I thought about the woman I'd been just 12 months earlier, the woman who'd been afraid to claim her own expertise, who'd let someone diminish her life's work, who'd almost married a man who could never see her. Artemisia Gentileschi once said, "I will show you what a woman can do." I began, and the room fell silent. For 400 years, her work has been doing exactly that, showing us strength, survival, refusal, showing us that women's voices matter, that women's stories deserve to be told and remembered and preserved. I clicked to the next slide. Lucrezia's portrait, now hanging in Florence, restored to her full glory. This painting spent nearly a century misattributed, dismissed as a copy, hidden away in a private library, not because it wasn't valuable, but because no one took the time to really look, to see what was there. I paused, letting that sink in. How many more voices are waiting to be recovered? How many more stories are hiding in plain sight, dismissed or forgotten because we're not paying attention? After the speech, during the reception, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 25, nervously clutching a glass of wine. "Ms. Thornton, I'm a graduate student in art history. I want to specialize in authentication and appraisal. Everyone says it's too competitive, that I should focus on something more realistic. But then I read about your discovery of the Gentileschi, and I thought, you thought maybe it's worth trying anyway." I finished. She nodded. I pulled out my business card and wrote my personal email on the back. "Send me your CV," I said. "I'm looking for a research assistant, someone who's passionate about recovery work, Someone who understands that it's not about the money, it's about giving voice to the silenced. Her eyes widened. Really? You'd consider me? I'd be honored to work with someone who cares this much, I said. And who knows? Maybe you'll be the one to discover the next lost masterpiece. After she left, practically floating on air, Catherine appeared at my side. Still changing lives, I see. Just passing along what you taught me, I said. About seeing worth that others miss. She smiled. You're going to be just fine, Olivia Thornton. I already am, I said. And for the first time in my life, I meant it completely. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.